built my firm on 7 years of 18-hour days, client calls I took from parking lots, and lunches I skipped because I couldn't afford both rent and food in the same month. I did it without a single dollar from my husband's family. I did it while his mother spent every Thanksgiving telling the table that I was playing house with my little business idea and that her son deserved a wife who actually came home for dinner. I want you to remember that part, because it matters later. My name is Layla. I'm 32 years old and I own a commercial interior design firm in Austin, Texas. We specialize in hospitality spaces, hotels, restaurants, boutique retail. By the time this story happened, I had 14 full-time employees, a project backlog that stretched 8 months out, and a lease on the entire 4th floor of a mixed-use building on South Congress. What my in-laws didn't know, what I had very deliberately never mentioned to them, was that I didn't just lease that floor. I own the building. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I met my husband Carson at 24. He was warm and funny and completely different from the rest of his family, though it took me years to understand just how different. His parents, his mother especially, came from old Austin money. The kind that shows up in the name of a hospital wing and a street in the Hyde Park neighborhood. His mother, whom I'll call my mother-in-law, was not a cruel woman in obvious ways. She was the kind of person who smiles while she says the thing that cuts you. His older brother was the obvious one, the one who would say out loud what everyone else was thinking, which in that family meant things like, Carson could have married someone from a family we already know, or Layla's little venture must be doing okay if you two can afford that car. His little venture comment about my firm, when we were already billing $2.3 million a year. I didn't argue. I never argued with them. Carson knew why. We talked about it enough times that he stopped asking me to just say something at the table. I told him the same thing every time. I don't need their approval. I just need them to stay out of my way. For 6 years they mostly did. Then my firm landed the Redstone contract. Redstone was a boutique hotel group expanding into 3 new markets simultaneously: Austin, Nashville, and Denver. They needed a design firm that could handle all 3 properties under one creative vision, with project management tight enough to keep all 3 timelines synchronized. It was the kind of contract that changes the category of your company, not just the revenue, though that was significant, but what you become in the industry after you do it. When we won the bid over 2 firms from New York and 1 from Chicago, I cried in my car in the parking garage of the Redstone offices for about 4 minutes, then called my project director and got back to work. I did not tell my in-laws. Carson told his mother. I'd asked him not to, but he was proud of me, and she was his mother, and I understand that. By the next Sunday dinner, the whole family knew. That's when things shifted. My mother-in-law started calling more, not to congratulate me, or not only that, she started asking questions. About the structure of the firm, about ownership percentages, about whether we had investors. She framed it as curiosity, as pride even, but I'd sat across from enough clients in negotiation to know what someone sounds like when they're doing due diligence. Then my brother-in-law called Carson. He didn't call me, he called Carson, which told me everything I needed to know about how he viewed the architecture of our marriage. He told Carson that the family felt, he said, like it was a sentiment they'd voted on together. That given the family's name and network in Austin, which had undoubtedly contributed to the kind of environment where a firm like mine could thrive, it was reasonable to discuss some form of acknowledgement, some formal stake. Carson told me that night. He was careful about how he said it, watching my face the whole time. When he finished, I was quiet for a long moment. How much? I asked. He said 30%, Mom thinks it should be 40. I looked at my husband. He looked back at me. Neither of us said anything for a few seconds. Okay, I said. Okay? I heard you. I went to my home office and closed the door. I sat at my desk for a while. Not because I was upset, I was. But that wasn't why I sat there. I sat there because I needed to think clearly, and I think best when I'm still. Here's what I knew: I had worked for this. Every contract, every late night, every client who initially went with someone else and came back 2 years later because the other firm couldn't deliver, that was mine. The family's name and network had contributed exactly nothing to my client list. My first 5 clients were referrals from a woman I'd met at a Chamber of Commerce breakfast. My anchor client in year 3 came from a cold email I wrote at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. No one from my husband's family had ever once introduced me to a potential client. Not once. But I also knew something they didn't know. I knew. 2 years earlier, when the building on South Congress came up for sale, I'd moved quietly. I used a holding company I'd established specifically to keep my personal and business assets separate. The purchase went through an LLC, Lark Capital Holdings, with no public connection to my name or my firm. My attorney was meticulous about it. Even the property management company that handled the building's day-to-day operations didn't advertise who the underlying owner was. To most people, including my tenants and the businesses that shared the building with my firm, I was just a tenant with a nice corner suite on the 4th floor. To my in-laws, I was a woman who leased office space and had gotten lucky with a hotel contract. I let them believe that. For 3 weeks after Carson told me about their demand, I said nothing. I didn't call my mother-in-law back when she left a voicemail. I didn't bring it up at the one dinner we had during that period. I just kept working, kept the Redstone project moving, kept my team focused. What I was actually doing was preparing. I called my attorney. I called my accountant. I had 2 conversations with a friend who practiced family law, not because I thought I'd need it, but because I wanted to understand every angle of what I was about to do before I did it. I also talked to my building manager, a steady and unflappable man named Warren who had worked with me since I bought the property. I told him there was a chance someone might contact his office asking about the building's ownership or management. I told him what I wanted him to do if that happened. He said, "Say less, I got it." I love Warren. My mother-in-law scheduled a family dinner for the 2nd Saturday in March. She did it through Carson, framed it as a general family gathering, but she CC'd me on the email and the subject line was, "Important Family Discussion." I confirmed. I told Carson I'd be there. What I didn't tell him, what I still hadn't told anyone, was that I'd scheduled a client presentation for that same morning. The Redstone creative director and 2 of her colleagues were flying in from Nashville to review the Phase 1 concepts for the Austin property. I'd arranged for the meeting to take place at my office. Full team present. Materials printed and mounted. Catering from the restaurant on the 2nd floor of our building that I had, not incidentally, helped design. The meeting was set for 10 a.m. The family dinner was at 6 p.m. I was not expecting my in-laws to show up at my office. I want to be clear about that because I've told this story a few times and people assume I set up some elaborate trap. I didn't. What happened next was entirely their doing. At 11:45, while my team was walking the Redstone creative director through a 3D render of the Austin lobby concept, my office manager came to the conference room door with an expression I recognized as controlled alarm. She leaned in and said quietly that there were 4 people in the lobby who said they were family and insisted on coming up. I asked her to hold them in the lobby and give me 5 minutes. I stepped out, walked to my own office, closed the door and took a breath. Then I went to the lobby. My mother-in-law was there, my brother-in-law was there, his wife was there, and my mother-in-law had brought her oldest friend, a woman who I'll call the family friend, who had no business being there whatsoever, but whose presence was clearly intended to function as a kind of social reinforcement, a witness, a validator, someone whose opinion my mother-in-law respected and wanted on her side. My mother-in-law looked around the lobby the way she always did in spaces I'd created, assessing without acknowledging. Then she looked at me. "We thought it was time to have a real conversation," she said. "In a professional setting, since this is where you seem most comfortable." I looked at my brother-in-law. He had a folder under his arm. An actual folder, like he printed something out. "I have clients upstairs," I said. "This is not a good time." "It won't take long," my brother-in-law said. "We just want to talk numbers." He opened the folder right there in the lobby. He had a 1-page document. It outlined, in bullet points, the rationale for why my firm owed the family a 35% equity stake. The The rationale included things like the Mercer family name has been central to Austin's business community for 3 generations, and Carson's social connections provided indirect networking benefits to Layla's firm in its early years. I read it, all of it, standing there in my own lobby. Where did you get the 35% figure? I asked. It's a controlling minority, my brother-in-law said, standard for a situation like this. What situation is this exactly? My mother-in-law stepped forward. Her voice was very calm, which was how I knew she'd rehearsed this. Layla, we're not here to fight, we're here because this family deserves to be part of what you've built. And if you're not willing to have that conversation, then I'm gonna have to contact the management company for this building, and make it very clear that your tenancy here may need to be reviewed. I looked at her. You're going to call the building management company? I know the property manager personally, she said. Tom Aldrich, we've known each other for years, he'll take my call. Tom Aldrich had retired 14 months ago. Warren had replaced him. But I didn't say that. Go ahead, I said. Call him. She blinked. Just lightly. She'd expected resistance, a negotiation, maybe tears. She had not expected that. I'm sorry. Call the building management company, right now if you want. I'll wait. My brother-in-law's wife touched his arm. He shook her off. My mother-in-law took out her phone. She looked up the number. I watched her search for it, watched her find the main line. And she dialed. She put it on speaker because I think she wanted the family friends to hear the outcome. Warren answered on the second ring. Lark Property Management, this is Warren. Yes, hello, I'm looking for Tom Aldrich. I'm Darlene Mercer and I have a matter regarding a tenant in your South Congress building I need to discuss with the property owner. Tom's no longer with us, Warren said. I'm the current manager. Can I help you? A beat. Then my mother-in-law recovered smoothly. Yes, fine. I need to speak with the building's owner directly. It's regarding a tenant who may be in violation of. Ma'am, I'm going to stop you there. Warren's voice was even. Can I ask who you're trying to discuss? The design firm on the 4th floor, Layla. You're asking me to take action against the sole owner of this building. Silence. Not just from my mother-in-law, from everyone in that lobby. The family friend's expression shifted. My brother-in-law looked at the phone in his mother's hand. I'm sorry, what did you say? My mother-in-law said. The tenant you're describing, Warren said, is Layla Mercer. She is the sole owner of this property. I work for her. Is there anything else I can help you with? My mother-in-law lowered the phone. I watched her face go through several things in about 4 seconds. Disbelief first. Then recalculation. Then something I can only describe as a reshuffling. She was trying to figure out how to respond in a way that preserved her authority in front of the family friend, in front of her son, in front of me. She didn't find it. You own this building, my brother-in-law said. It wasn't a question. I do, I said. Since when? 2 years ago. He looked at the folder in his hand, then he closed it. So your plan, I said, keeping my voice level, was to threaten me with the building management company, in a building that I own, in order to pressure me into signing over equity in a company that I built, using a name and network that contributed nothing to that company, in front of my clients who are currently upstairs waiting for me to come back to a meeting. No one said anything. I'm going to go back upstairs now, I said. You're all welcome to let yourselves out. I turned and walked to the elevator. My office manager was standing near the reception desk. I gave her a look that I hoped communicated both I'm fine and please make sure they leave, and she gave me a small nod that told me she understood both. The elevator doors closed. I rode up to the 4th floor. I straightened my jacket in the reflection of the metal doors. When they opened, I walked back into the conference room, apologized for the brief interruption, and asked the Redstone creative director where we'd left off. She smiled and said, "The lobby lighting grid, we loved the warm tungsten concept." Good, I said, let's dig in. The Redstone meeting concluded at 2:30. The creative director shook my hand at the elevator and said they were looking forward to the partnership. After they left, I sat in the empty conference room for a few minutes by myself. My phone had 7 texts from Carson. I could see from the previews that he'd heard from his mother. The text started confused and ended somewhere between apologetic and overwhelmed. I texted him back, "I'm okay. Come home tonight and we'll talk. I love you." What I didn't know yet, what I found out over the following 2 weeks, was that my brother-in-law had not quietly retreated after the lobby incident. He'd done what people do when they're embarrassed and have too much pride to absorb it privately. He'd talked. He'd told people in their social circle a version of the story in which I had behaved erratically, had been hostile to his mother, had hidden assets from the family in a way that suggested I was planning something against Carson. He used the word deceitful. He used it more than once, apparently. Word got back to me through 2 separate people within 10 days. I called my attorney. Defamation is a specific legal standard, and my attorney was careful to walk me through what that meant in practical terms. What my brother-in-law was saying was false. It was being said to people in my professional and social community. It was causing reputational harm. My attorney sent a formal cease and desist letter to my brother-in-law's home address within the week. He called Carson furious. Carson, to his enormous credit, said, "You should have thought about that before you started telling people things that weren't true." That was the moment I knew my husband and I were going to be okay. Not because things weren't hard, they were. But because he understood, finally and completely, which side of this he was on. My mother-in-law called me directly about 10 days after the lobby. I answered. She started with a version of an apology that was framed as mutual. We both made mistakes here, kind of framing that attempted to redistribute blame in a way I found familiar and tiresome. I let her finish. Then I said, clearly and without cruelty, that I was not interested in pretending this was a mutual misunderstanding. That what happened was an attempt to coerce me in my own workplace in front of my clients, and that I would not be minimizing that. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I didn't know you'd built all of this on your own." "Yes, you did," I said. "You just didn't believe it counted." I didn't say it to be cruel. I said it because it was true, and because sometimes the most honest thing you can give someone is the specific shape of what they did. We did not go to Christmas that year. We went to my parents in Tucson, where my mum made green chile enchiladas, and my dad fell asleep in the recliner before 8 p.m. And it was the best holiday I'd had in 6 years. The Redstone project completed on schedule, all 3 properties. The Austin location was featured in Hospitality Design magazine the following spring. My firm's name was in the first paragraph. My brother-in-law's cease and desist resulted in a formal retraction sent to the people he'd spoken to. My attorney confirmed it went out. I watched over the following month as the version of the story he'd been spreading quietly corrected itself through the same networks it had traveled. Carson and I still talk about that period. Not often, but honestly when we do. He told me once that watching me walk back into that conference room after everything that happened in the lobby was one of the most clarifying moments of his life. He said he understood something about me in that moment that he hadn't fully understood before. I asked him what. He thought about it for a second. Then he said that you were never asking for their approval, not once, not even a little. He was right, I wasn't. What I was doing every single day for 7 years was building something that couldn't be taken. Something that existed on its own terms, in my name, with my fingerprints on every decision. I wasn't chasing validation, I was making something real. The people who bet against you, quietly, over Sunday dinners, through small cutting remarks and confident predictions of your failure. They never understand that part. They think the work is about proving something to them. It isn't, it was never about them at all. Build the thing, own the building, let them call the manager. I think about that lobby a lot. Not the drama of it, not the folder, not the phone call, not my mother-in-law's face when Warren said what he said. I think about the quiet before it. The 3 weeks I said nothing, the way I just kept showing up to work every morning while they were waiting for me to panic. That stillness wasn't something I was born with. I learned it the hard way, over years of being underestimated by people who thought their opinion of me was the same thing as the truth about me. What I figured out slowly, through a lot of failed attempts at arguing and defending and proving, was that the most powerful thing I could do was simply refuse to let their version of me become my operating reality. That's not a small thing to learn. Most people never do. There's a version of this story where I confront them at that first Sunday dinner, where I say, clearly and firmly, that my firm owes this family nothing, where I make my case and defend my record and list every client I landed without a single introduction from them. And maybe I feel better for about 20 minutes. Then what? They dig in. My brother-in-law starts making calls. My mother-in-law recruits allies. The whole thing becomes a war that I'm fighting on their terms, on their timeline, in their arena. Instead, I went home, closed my office door, and started thinking about what I actually controlled. That's the thing about integrity. Real integrity, not the bumper sticker version. It means doing the right thing even when no one is watching, even when there's no immediate payoff, even when the people around you are operating in bad faith. I didn't build Lark Capital in secret to set a trap. I built it because it was the right financial decision, made carefully and cleanly, and I kept it private because that was the right professional decision. The fact that it later became the clearest possible answer to a threat, that was just cause and effect. When you consistently make sound decisions, they accumulate, they become a foundation that holds when pressure is applied. And the intelligence piece of it, knowing when to speak and when to be quiet, knowing which information to hold and which to release and when, that didn't come from being clever. It came from paying attention, from actually studying the people and situations around me instead of just reacting to them. My mother-in-law told me she knew the property manager personally. She said his name with confidence. She had no idea he'd been replaced 14 months ago. She was operating on old information because she'd never bothered to learn the current reality. I had, because it was my building and I treat the things I own with attention and care. What I want people to take from this isn't a strategy. It's something simpler than that. Carson said it best actually that night when we talked. He said I was never asking for their approval. Not even once. He was right. And that's the whole thing really. The moment you stop needing someone's approval is the moment they lose the ability to threaten you with its removal. My mother-in-law thought she was holding something over me. She didn't understand that I'd stopped wanting what she was withholding years before she tried to weaponize it. Build what you believe in. Protect it with clear thinking. Keep going when it's hard, not because someone is watching, but because you know what it's worth. The rest tends to take care of itself.